faith stronger. Now you might say, John, being a pastor, that takes enough faith. You don't need to go and go be a missionary and hurt yourself and whatever. And that's true. But you can even have faith. You can strengthen your faith as a programmer or a doctor or a lawyer or a person who sells little trinkets at a store. You can have your faith strengthened regardless of what you do. But the key is, are you strengthening in your faith? Is your faith getting stronger? Have you made a decision that you are going to live towards God's standard? And so for the second item in our altar, it's a weight scale. How are you weighing up? How are you matching up to what God says? Is your weight going down, as it were? Is your faith going up? What's going on with that? Second item of service is a scale. But how are you going to do that in real life? How are you going to weigh yourself? Maybe one thing that you've been struggling with is that you are afraid to get married. In that case, maybe one way to strengthen your faith is to go get married. And in another case, maybe one of your real concerns is that you're never going to find that special someone. In your case, maybe you need to stop dating or stop wanting to date for a while to increase your faith. See, it doesn't really matter what it is. The question is what other things you're putting on your altar and how you're going to get rid of them and what you're measuring yourself against. We need to measure ourselves against a strengthening faith. That is one important aspect of worship, our faith being strengthened. The third item of service on our altar must be thankfulness. I think that Americans aren't very good at thankfulness. Most Americans I know dislike their parents who give rules when they're a kid. They grow up, their parents, they see their parents, oh, how bad they were. How awful they were. And then the parents get older, and then all of a sudden, oh, now I'm burdened with taking care of them, so they send them off to a nursing home. I don't see that so much in the Chinese model of care for parents. They seem to actually care about their parents and want to help them throughout their life. But I've talked to many Chinese people, and they say, although they pretend to be thankful, that they're actually very angry with their parents. They're actually very frustrated with all the things that they made them put them through, and then they feel like they have to live two lives where they show they're thankful, but then they aren't really. I think some people feel the same way about God. People feel like, okay, fine. So God, now I need to make an unchangeable decision for you. Now I'm stuck with you. And then now I have to keep on be living a more and more dangerous life or more and more sacrificial life for you. This isn't what I want. Fine, maybe I'll do it, but I'm not going to be thankful about it. So why should we be thankful? What's the cause of it? In verses 8 to 10, Paul explains to the Colossians how to motivate themselves to be faithful. To understand what he's talking about, you have to understand that they were influenced by Gnosticism. Gnosticism. They believed that there was the fullness of God in the beginning of time. And that God let an elemental spirit come from him. And that elemental spirit created something else. And that elemental spirit created something else. And that elemental spirit, you get the idea. Eventually, one of them created the physical world, which was evil. And so they were struggling, the Gnostics, to try to get back to the fullness of God. And so the way they did it, the way they said that it was supposed to work is, they were supposed to find a key, a secret knowledge, to open up the door so they can go back to this one. And then they could go back to this one. And they could go back to this one and back to this one. And eventually, if they lived a very sacrificial life, they might be able to get back to the fullness of God. So, now with that background, let's look at verses 8 to 10. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the basic principles of this world, rather than on Christ. For in Christ all the fullness of deity lives in bodily form. And you have been given fullness in Christ, who is head over every power and authority. Now, Paul is not condemning all philosophy, but the philosophy of the Gnostics. His point to the Colossians was, hey, you have found the secret passageway back here, back to the fullness of God. You don't need to go through all these elemental spirits anymore. That is why you should be thankful. Later on, he also tells them that they should be thankful because God has taken away the sins which led to their spiritual separation from God. His point was that we need to serve God with thankfulness. And we fuel thankfulness by remembering what God has done. So our next item is what God has done. We need to be thankful for what God has done in taking away all these other things that we thought were important, that we thought were essential to our lives. And that is how we stir ourselves to be thankful to God. To worship God, we must submit to Him. And worship is, like I said, it's more than just service. It's also submission. So although we have our service items here, we need more items to really worship God in truth. The fourth item on our altar is submission to God alone. And the fifth item on our altar must be submission to God's moral attributes. The fourth item is submission to God alone. I've known many people who've been interested in a very personalized church spiritual experience, which they feel they don't get at church. They are more interested in crystals designed to absorb bad influences, or walking on hot coals. I've known people that have been interested in belting rods. They say that if you walk with one of those, you can find like an ancient Indian burial ground or stuff like that. Personally, I've never been so excited about those kind of things. I'm more excited about the return of kolaches to Sunday school. The point is, that food is much more important to me than that stuff. Walking on coals. I mean, I can walk on coals. I tried picking up a coal a few days ago, burning coal from my grill. Yeah, that wasn't a very good idea. But if somebody can do it, that's great. But that doesn't signify to me. They're spiritual because they can pull that off. But the point is that the Colossians had the same kind of people that we have today that are advocating this kind of spirituality. And in verse 18, it says, "Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you for the prize. Such a person goes into great detail about what he has seen, and his unspiritual mind puffs him up with idle notions." Basically, they want to see, these kind of people want to fill their lives with talismans. They want to make spirits submit to them. They want to use the spiritual world to gain power and authority and effectiveness and to validate their own ideas. But true worshipers don't put that kind of thing on their altar. True worshipers do not use this to try to force the spiritual world to submit to them.